Fellas, such violence. Is that really necessary? You need to learn how to compromise. What? You don't know what compromise is? Compromise is defined as an agreement or settlement of a dispute that is reached by each side giving something up. Why don't you try that? Compromise worked for the United States of America. It just may work for you. Here, let me explain. Back in 1819, the United States was beginning to grow. You remember Florida was added in 1819, treaty with Spain and all that? The following year, in 1820, Missouri asks to join the Union. They want to become a state. And the type of state they want to be is a slave state. After all, they're already growing cotton there. At that time, there were 11 states that allowed slavery and 11 states that did not allow slavery. With 11 slave states and 11 free states, no one had an advantage when making laws in Congress. There was balance. Remember, there are 2 senators per state. Remember that? That means in 1819, there were how many senators from the 11 slave states? Come on, math people. 2 per state, 11 slave. That's right. There were 22 senators from slave states. And so that means there were 22 senators from free states. Like I said, there was balance. But adding Missouri would upset this balance and give slave states an advantage when making laws in Congress. Would they fight? No. It's time to compromise. Introducing Henry Clay, the Great Compromiser. Clay suggested the Missouri Compromise, 1820. It is a compromise, so what does each side get? The South gets Missouri added to the Union, the United States, as a slave state. The North gets Maine added to the Union, the United States, as a free state. Balance is kept. But wait, what about all the Western territories in the United States? What's going to happen when those territories in the West want to join the Union as well? Is there going to be a fight every time? No. The final part of the Missouri Compromise said, draw a line west of Missouri at 36 degrees latitude. Any territory added north of that line would automatically be a free state. Any territory added as a state that was south of that line would automatically be a slave state. No reason to argue. Problem solved. See, in 1845, Texas wants to join the United States. They are south of that 36 degrees line, so Texas will be anyone? Yes, Texas automatically will be a slave state. The compromise works. See, fighting just isn't necessary. Following the Missouri Compromise in 1820, the United States just kept on growing, adding territories with the belief that westward expansion was their right. You remember, you know the story. They called it their manifest destiny. Eventually, enough people will move west and want to turn those territories into states. But what kind of states would they be? Slave or free? Oh, that's not a problem anymore, thanks to Henry Clay and the Missouri Compromise. We'll just see if the territory that wants statehood is north of that 36-degree north line. If it is, it will be a free state. If it is south of that line, it will be a slave state. No fussing, no fighting, no sweat. In 1850, just a year after the 49ers came a-rushing to find gold, California wants to join the United States as a free state. No problem. We'll just see if it's north or south of that 36-degree line. Uh-oh. We have a problem. Part of California would be north of that 36-degree line, and part of it south. Can a state really be half slave, half free? Well, what are we gonna do? Fight? No. It's time to compromise. Henry Clay has the solution again? Wait a minute. Isn't Henry Clay the guy who came up with the Missouri Compromise back in 1820? And now it's 1850. That's 30 years later. Henry Clay is still coming up with compromises? No wonder they call him the Great Compromiser. So Henry Clay suggests the Compromise of 1850. It says, hey, free states, you get California to join as yet another free state in the United States. And free states, you now get to have what you wanted. The trading of enslaved people is banned in Washington, D.C. Slavery is still allowed in D.C. You just can't buy and sell people in the nation's capital anymore. Northern free states were happy about this. But this is a compromise, remember? So what do the southern slave states get? Well, now people in the Southwest territories, even if they're above that old 36-degree line, are allowed to vote on whether or not they're going to be a free state or a slave state. Many people are already growing cotton out there too. So southern slave states are happy with this. Southern slave states get one other thing too. It's a big thing. They get a law, the Fugitive Slave Law, which says the North must help capture all those runaway enslaved people in the North and return them to slavery in the South. No longer can runaways make it north and say, hey, we're free. Now, Northern authorities are bound by law to capture fugitives, runaways, enslaved people, and return them to Southern plantations. No African American, whether enslaved, on the run, or free, will be safe in the United States of America. It is a very dangerous time for all. Many free African Americans who had been free for their entire lives living in northern free states were kidnapped and taken down south, sold on to plantations, never to be heard from again. I, John Brown, am now quite certain that the crimes of this guilty land will never be purged away but with blood. John Brown. Stephen Douglas, also known as the Little Giant, so called because standing at 5 feet 4 inches, he wasn't exactly big, but a giant personality he was. Douglas was a congressman from the state of Illinois, and he wanted to build a railroad from his home state of Illinois into the West. Something that would be much easier if the Kansas-Nebraska territory was organized into states. The little giant, Stephen Douglas, introduced the Kansas-Nebraska Act to Congress. He suggested that people within the territory decide on whether or not they will be a free state or a slave state by something called popular sovereignty. Popular sovereignty means people rule. And just how do people rule? Correct. By voting. But the Missouri Compromise back in 1820 said that because the Kansas-Nebraska territory is north of the 36-degree latitude line, any states made from this territory should automatically be free. But when Congress passes the Kansas-Nebraska Act, that's the final nail in the coffin for the Missouri Compromise. That 36-degree latitude line just doesn't matter anymore. So let the voting begin. But the only thing that began was trouble. Pro-slavery forces, pro meaning in favor of slavery, pour across the border from Missouri. They are gunning to make Kansas a slave state. They are the border ruffians. Ruffians like rough and tough, like me. Okay, telling you that you must wait to use the bathroom until the other student gets back doesn't exactly make me rough. But these guys really were. The border ruffians begin to take charge. They are determined to force people to vote to make Kansas a slave state. It is really a reign of terror. The violence even makes its way to the Senate floor of Congress in Washington, D.C., when Representative Preston Brooks attacked Senator Charles Sumner with a cane, beating him nearly to death. And the violence is all about the Kansas question. But soon, anti-slavery forces arrive in Kansas, mostly from northern states, and they're there to take a stand against the pro-slavery border ruffians. But this only leads to more bloodshed. Even the sons of famous abolitionist John Brown head to Kansas to help anti-slavery forces. But soon, they find themselves in more trouble than they can handle. Their old man, John Brown, heads out from his home in Ohio to rescue his sons in Kansas. He quickly nurses them back to health and heads out for revenge. In an incident called the Pottawatomie Massacre, John Brown leads anti-slavery forces out and kills 5 pro-slavery men. John Brown is out to bully the bully. When all the dust settles, 2 years later, Kansas emerges as a free state, although with a dubious nickname, Bleeding Kansas. The time for compromise is at an end. For the first time, Americans are killing Americans over what kind of country this will be: slave or free.